Hey folks, tonight I'm going to tell you a true crime story, gently, Dulings. You're here for a mystery that lingers like a low hum in the room, a case that seemed to evaporate before anyone could catch it, and an arrest that finally ripples through a quiet town like the wind through blinds. You can hear it now, the soft tick of your wall clock, the faint whir of your ceiling fan, the little sounds that make the night feel safe. I know you like stories that arrive slowly and stay, stories that make you breathe a little deeper. So before you get comfy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. If you're listening from a different corner of the world, drop your city and your local time in the comments. I love seeing how this story arcs across the map in real time. Now, turn off the lights, switch on the fan for some gentle noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. You step into Graybridge, Oregon, the kind of place that keeps its secrets in cedar. It smells like rain even when it's not raining, and the sidewalks are glossed with that thin, stubborn sheen that never really dries. On Main, the bakery closes at 6, and the library locks up 5 minutes early if the sky looks mean. You pass the river first, slow, pewter, accepting. Then the mural on the brick wall, the one with fishing boats and beaming children, faded to the color of old postcards. You tuck your hands into your pockets, like you belong here. Because you do. Everyone belongs in a small town until the day they don't. The story lives on Broad Street in a house that used to be cream, but now is the color of wet paper. The hedge out front has a gap like a missing tooth. You pause at the gate, noticing how the latch stutters before it clicks, the way a throat clears before a confession. This is where Lena Hart was last seen in the spring of 2004. You don't say her name loudly. This town favors whispers. But you hear how people still say it. Lena, like a sigh. She left for a late shift at the diner, a place that smelled like coffee and grill grease and lemon cleaner, and she never walked back up Broad Street. No car abandoned by the highway, no scuffle in the gravel, no obvious villain casting a long shadow, just absence, precise and impossible. You walk, and you can almost feel the old flyers under your fingers. Thin paper, bold black type. The same photograph reprinted so many times, it became its own myth. Lena in a striped sweater. Lena was looking away from the camera, like she already knew the world would keep looking for her. Back then, the town turned itself inside out. Volunteer search lines stretched from the water tower to the mill. People beat the underbrush with broom handles. The pastor opened the fellowship hall as a staging area. There were casseroles, too much coffee, and the vague ache that comes with waiting. A fact hangs quietly in your mind. The Amber Alert system had become a national program just the year before, in 2003. In Graybridge, they debated whether Lena's case qualified. She was 19, not a child, and she had no car, no phone. The sheriff's office made calls anyway, trying to widen the circle. It's a neat piece of history to set on the shelf, like a little ceramic house with a light inside. Technology and networks improving, but the darkness here, staying stubbornly analog. You notice a strange detail that never made the papers. A neighbor remembered that the porch light at the Hart house glowed an odd, bluish tint the night Lena vanished, like those cheap bulbs teenagers buy, the ones that make white t-shirts look neon. The neighbor swears it looked wrong, like the house had slipped under aquarium glass. Maybe it was a failing filament. Maybe the bulb was new and mislabeled. Maybe details are just magnets seeking iron filings of meaning. Still, you see that eerie light in your mind as you drift down the sidewalk, the blue made bluer by memory. Graybridge learned to live with an empty desk at the diner, the one in the corner where Lena folded silverware into napkins with the crisp competence of a person eager to be elsewhere. Years passed. Birthdays stacked like plates. The mural on the brick wall chipped at the edges. A high school freshman became a senior, then left town. The Hart house stayed a house, even if every draft sounded like a footstep. Those who prayed for a miracle learned the geometry of hope. You fold it small enough to carry, then tuck it in your pocket, so no one sees you clutching it. You keep moving, turning onto the street that leads to the river path. The willows lean down like they're eavesdropping. The path smells of wet earth and something metallic, a tell that the river is close enough to lick. You think about all the stories we tell about water, how it takes what we give it and gives back what it wants, when it wants. No one ever found Lena's sweater or shoes in this river. It's a kind of negative evidence, a blank spot on the canvas that instructs your eye where not to look. Then, 2 months ago now, you can hear the town's breath catching an arrest. Not a rumor, not a whispered maybe, but handcuffs and a booking photo and a charge. Murder. A man who sat 2 pews behind the Hart family at Easter for years, who fixed lawnmowers behind the hardware store, who waved at the crossing guard and paid in cash. You'd seen him too, a background character in your memory, so ordinary your brain never put a label on him. And suddenly, the town sees his face everywhere, like a water stain on the ceiling your eyes can't stop finding. You stop by the courthouse steps, feeling the grit of sand scattered for traction, little translucent grains that crunch under your shoes. You're not here for spectacle. You're here for the feeling of a puzzle piece clicking into place, even if it reveals a picture you don't want. The sheriff gives a short statement. Advances in forensic testing, new analysis of old fibers, and interviews re-interviewed. They mention CODIS, a database that's been quietly knitting threads between cases since the late 1992. And you picture the web, threads stretching across years, neighborhoods, and lives. It isn't fate. It's work, patient, and not cinematic at all. You notice people on the courthouse lawn doing that small-town math of politeness and panic. Some stand with arms crossed, elbows making a shelf for their unease. Others stare at their phones, as if the screen can tell them what to feel. A reporter from Portland stumbles over the town's name, Gray Bridge, not Gray Breege, and you feel the town flinch collectively, as if mispronunciation could bruise it. The diner tapes a note in the window. Closed today. See you tomorrow. The hardware store runs the radio low, as though grief respects volume control. You sit on the steps where the dry paint line meets the damp one, the concrete darker an inch lower, and let yourself imagine the earlier days. The porch bulb with its aquarium glow. The flyers that saturated telephone poles until you'd read them even with your eyes closed. The river pretending to be innocent. You sense a drift in the air, a small vacuum where certainty should be. The arrest is supposed to fill it. Instead, it rearranges the furniture of doubt. There's an academic debate that slips into your thoughts, the kind that shows up in criminology lectures and courtroom battles. How reliable are memories when you stretch them across decades? The brain rewrites, reconciles, and protects. Witnesses honestly change their stories because the story changed them first. In Graybridge, where everyone remembers something, reality feels like a quilt made from clashing fabrics. Which squares are true? Which seams are wishful? You turn that question over like a coin, thumb tracing the ridged edge. At dusk, you walk back past the mural that's now half boat, half brick. The sky is the color of a bruise, choosing whether to heal. A dog barks 3 streets over, and the sound arrives in pieces, like it walked the long way around. You pass the library just as lights go dark. You see the librarian lock the door and briefly press her forehead to the glass, a gesture small enough to be private, large enough to shatter you. This is how a town absorbs shock quietly, bodily, as if turning to face a wave. You end up on Broad Street again, the house soft-edged in the near night. Someone has replaced the front light. It's warm now, amber, humane. The hedge still has its tooth-missing gap, though it's neater around the wound. You watch the curtains stir, then settle as if the house itself is breathing. You don't knock. You're not here for intrusion, only for witness. It's what you can offer, to look fully, to name what is seen without trying to own it. What you can't shake is the strangeness of relief braided with dread. An arrest means motion, paperwork, hearings, and a calendar littered with dates that begin as appointments and end as anniversaries. It means that people who said, "I always knew," will say it louder, and people who held their doubt like a secret savings account will feel both wise and cheated. It means that rumors will fight for the open air like kittens for the warmest patch of sun. You stand in the middle of the street and let all of that pass through you like a draft. The rain begins with that announcement, thin, meticulous, as if the sky is writing in small cursive. You tuck closer to the eaves and listen to the soft percussion. You understand why stories like this travel well. They remind us that silence is rarely empty, that the ordinary can hold an extraordinary amount of weight without bending. You think of Lena in that striped sweater, looking away from the camera, the frame unable to contain the rest of her life. You think of a town rehearsing normalcy for 21 years, only to be told the script has changed. You linger there, letting the sound of the rain fill the hollows of the night. And you realize this is how you are with every mystery. Close enough to feel the temperature shift, far enough to see its shape. You breathe in the petrichor, the damp cedar, and the old summer smell of a town that keeps its secrets in wood and stone. And as the porch light glows in its steady amber, you understand that beginnings and endings are only ideas we use to make the dark make sense. You step away, the soles of your shoes making that soft peel from the wet, and you carry Graybridge with you, not as a headline, not as a cautionary tale, but as a place that teaches you how to hold contradiction carefully, like a bird that might panic. The river moves indifferently in the dark. The mural waits for morning to bring back its colors. Somewhere, a courtroom calendar acquires a new date. And you, with the fan humming, listen. You move through Graybridge the morning after the courthouse announcement, and it feels like the town has been rewired in the dark. You smell cinnamon from the bakery, but it rides in on a thread of burned toast, like comfort arrived late and singed. Someone has chalked Lena in careful block letters along the sidewalk cracks, a hopscotch of grief. You step around the squares without meaning to, preserving a game that never promised a winner. Your phone vibrates with messages, links, rumors, ask-me's, and you let them pass like trains you're not boarding. You prefer the town itself. Porches with coffee cups, porch swings with the stillness of held breath, and a river that pretends not to listen. You turn down Maple, aiming for the police annex, the overflow building the county leased after their old evidence room started sweating in summer. You can feel the air inside before you enter. Drier, filtered, like a museum that only displays plastic bags. A clerk nods, recognizes your face from the meeting last year about open records, and slides the sign-in sheet with a pen that writes too smoothly. You leave your name in ink that looks expensive. Paper whispers as boxes move in the back. You're not here to touch case files, not today, only to stand near them and remember what closeness can do to a mystery. The arrest his name is in the paper now has tilted conversation into a fever chart. You notice how people talk in two registers. The public radio voice that says, "Let the process work," and the kitchen table voice that says, "But what if?" You hold both in your mouth like two sips of different tea, not sure which one warms you. A detective in a fleece vest steps into the hall, and you catch a flicker of relief on his face before it falls back behind professional glass. He's older than when you saw him on the news years ago, but you recognize the stubbornness that keeps people in jobs nobody thanks them for. He tells you carefully, without revealing more than sunshine laws allow, that they revisited cloth fibers from the diner. The original lab work from 2004 was competent and conservative. The technology then was like reading through fogged glass. Now, clearer. A thread found in vacuum sweepings from the back hall, bagged and forgotten in a box that once held copy paper, gave up new information after a rerun with better machines. The way he says it makes you picture the fiber as a stubborn witness finally in the mood to talk. He mentions something else, a tool mark on a window frame, a single scallop where wood didn't want to be moved. Old photos were rescanned at higher resolution. Software sharpened the edges. A pattern emerged, like a tide line. You think about the town's timeline, how it bends back on itself like a paperclip straightened and bent again. You think about a historical hinge that changed everything outside this annex. In 2018, when investigators identified the Golden State Killer using public genetic genealogy databases, a door opened that law enforcement had knocked on for years and heard only silence behind. Since then, agencies have navigated that path more often, carefully or clumsily. It's an anchor fact that sits neatly in your thoughts, a year that functions like a streetlight in a fog. You don't know if Graybridge used that method here, no one says, but you can feel its influence the way you feel the fan's breeze without looking at the blades. This is the part where an odd detail should arrive. And it does, uninvited and a bit embarrassing. The lawnmower man, the one now in a cell 2 counties over, was locally famous for always knotting pull cords into a tight triple loop when he returned your machine. People joked he gave your mower a wedding ring. The loops were tidy, identical, and almost pretty. You never thought about knots as a signature before, but now the image lands with a thunk in your chest. You think about hands and habits, about how everyone has a private alphabet they write into their tasks, and about how sometimes those alphabets leave marks. You step back into the street. Air carries the faint tint of an approaching storm. Even though the forecast promises only clouds, the town hums on, though its frequency has changed. At the diner, the Close Today note has been replaced by Open. A new note below reads, "Pie for Lena, pay what you can." You push the door and get the chorus you've been waiting for. Spoon on china, low laughter that self-edits at the end. And the oldies station playing a song that pretends innocence is a thing we can tune to. You slide into the corner booth Lena once used to fold napkins and imagine your elbows leaving ghostly rings where coffee cups used to sweat. People tell you things here because you keep your voice small. A fry cook mentions that back then, nights felt shorter. A retired teacher remembers Lena's essays about wanting to be a park ranger and how she wrote about learning every tree in the county like they were classmates. Someone else remembers that a set of blue-tinted bulbs went on sale the week she vanished. Buy 2, get 1, and that a stack of them disappeared from the hardware shelves overnight. You don't know whether to elevate that detail or let it settle with the sugar granules on the table, but it refuses to dissolve completely. You walk the long way after lunch, past the ball field, with bases still chalked, though the season ended, past the VFW, where a paper flag in the window fades from patriotic to pastel. A crow drops a walnut on the street just ahead of you and hops, twice, triumphant, when it cracks. You think about luck and its rude methods. You think, too, about the debate that sneaks into your mind, like a cat under a fence, the ethics of investigative genetic genealogy. Scholars circle the same questions under different lamps. What does consent mean when your cousin uploads a family tree? How do we weigh a community's privacy against a family's need for answers? Is justice a light you turn on, or a light that can still blind? You hold the debate at arm's length, and then bring it close. The truth is a heat lamp. You can warm your hands, or you can leave a mark. Evening falls on the courthouse again, and you drift toward it as if the building has its own tide. The front steps host knots of talkers. There's a candlelight vigil planned for tomorrow. Someone posted a flyer with hearts 2 round, the penmanship of a person who makes their letters sing. The sheriff's second in command speaks briefly to the cluster of reporters, all zipped jackets and eager eyebrows. She confirms what the statement said. A composite picture formed from old evidence, viewed with new eyes. An out-of-state lab assisted. Interviews were redone with fresh questions. Patterns were checked against databases that didn't exist 21 years ago. You watch her deliberate pace and realize that what most looks like magic in police work is often just the stubborn collection of small, boring truths. You remember another historical point you carry around like a pocket stone. The Miranda decision in 1966, which shaped every arrest since with its now familiar warning. You imagine those words spoken in a room miles from here, measured, recorded, and laminated by procedure. It calms you to think of rules when the story itself refuses to be orderly. It also unnerves you. Rules are beautiful until someone we love disappears, and we want a result more than we want a process. You notice that pull in yourself and name it quietly, so it doesn't name you. You wander to the river path again, hearing the willows talk to one another in leaf rustle. The water has the texture of brushed steel under a lowering sky. You try to follow the path the investigators must have taken in their minds. Last known steps, last heard words, and the ordinary mile that everyone underestimates. You imagine Lena's route replayed by hundreds of shoes over the years, the town unconsciously practicing her walk as if tribute could become reanimation. You note how wayfinding signs have been updated, shiny, modern font, new reflectors that catch headlights at night. The town keeps moving forward in the ways it can, which sometimes looks like replacing a sign with the same word. In the small museum near City Hall, you pause at a glass case that holds Graybridge artifacts, a school letterman jacket from 1979, an old ledger from the mill, and a typewriter ribbon tin with a design so elegant you forgive a century's dust. In the corner, a hand-drawn map of Broad Street, made by a scout troop, hangs slightly crooked. The key at the bottom labels the Hart House, and, in neat block letters, marks Porch Light. The docent tells you the kids added it because they noticed the house by its glow, and your gut gives that small, undeniable dip proof that children often see what adults rationalize away. There's another odd corner to the story, and it finds you when you stop by the hardware store to buy batteries you don't need. The owner, who has the kind of memory that never lets go of serial numbers, mentions that the suspect once returned a pack of screws because the heads were off by a hair from what he wanted. Said they sang wrong, the owner says, and you feel that phrase hook into your mind. Screws singing wrong. You've never thought about the music of hardware, but now you can hear it. Tiny metallic choruses, sharp and neat. Unacceptable if they go flat. You file it away, not sure if it matters to any courtroom, but sure it matters to the human portrait you're assembling. You pass the library again and notice a display at the front, a row of books about memory and testimony, titles you've heard of, some you haven't. You open one and read a paragraph about retrieval-induced distortion, how retelling a memory can smooth its edges until it fits the story better than it fits the past. The librarian sees you standing there and says softly, "Be kind to your brain. It's trying to protect you." It's an invitation and a benediction, and you accept it with a nod you hope carries your gratitude. Night settles the way fog settles on a river incrementally, everywhere at once. Lights blink on in kitchen windows. The fan hum in your own room later will be a mercy. But for now, you stay outside, walking the block where porch conversations make warm ellipses in the air. A teen on a bike coasts past with a headlamp that strobes a little, not quite synced, and you feel how the town's rhythm keeps tripping on a beat it can't find. The air smells like damp bark, like someone watered their tomato plants at sundown, like laundry that didn't quite dry. The sensory becomes a blanket you pull to your chin. You revisit the courthouse lawn and find a cluster of people swapping dates the way others swap recipes. "I graduated in '05, someone says. "I remember the posters at prom check-in. We were at the river that weekend." Another adds, "When the helicopters came." You pocket those images carefully, because they feel like the town handing you its wallet and trusting you not to take anything. You offer what you can in return: patience, a gentle voice, and a refusal to turn any single fact into a sword. When your feet lead you back to Broad, you see the Hart porch light again, warm, not aquatic. A shape moves behind the curtain, then retreats, and you avert your eyes, gifting the house a little privacy. The hedge gap remains, the tooth missing, the smile kinder for the imperfection. You rest your palm flat on the gate, feel the cool of the metal, and imagine how many hands learned this exact temperature over the years. Somewhere, an attic fan kicks on, and you mistake the whir for an ocean before you correct yourself. You like the mistake better. There's a lesson in all this you don't want to frame too neatly. You know how narratives crave shape, How audiences lean toward arcs with lockstep morality. You could tell this story with a high contrast filter, but you choose the softer lens, one that lets shadow be shadow without insisting it's a monster. You let the new arrest be what it is, a fresh branch on a tree that already lived through ice storms, termites, and 2 dry summers in a row, and still leafed out again. You can honor the branch without pretending it rewrites the trunk. On your way home, you pass a notice board where the church, the PTA, the farmer's market, and the hiking club all pin their flyers into the same cork. A fresh sheet of printer paper sits among them. Town hall questions and answers all are welcome. A staple sits slightly crooked at the corner, a tiny imperfection that makes the whole thing look more human. You think of questions you'll take about the cases that spill over, about what to do with anger that wakes you at 2 a.m., and about how to carry the weight of a name you never knew and now cannot forget. You turn the key in your own door and listen as the hinge speaks in a voice you've heard your entire life. Inside, the air is a degree cooler than the street, and you're grateful for the technology that lets comfort be a dial. You set your phone face down. You move slower on purpose. You pour water that tastes faintly of copper, and you don't mind. You prepare yourself to say goodnight to a town that won't sleep, knowing that sleep isn't a promise, only a hope we set on the bedside table like a glass of water for the morning. Before you lie down, you let one more academic argument rest on your chest like a book you mean to finish. Can geographic profiling truly predict behavior, or does it merely map the scars a perpetrator leaves behind? The debate runs like a quiet engine in journals and classrooms, and now, in your room, you listen to it idle. Maybe it's both. Maybe the shape of harm is also the shape of the eventual answer. You allow that thought to stay without needing it to be beautiful. Then you close your eyes and keep moving anyway, the way you've been moving all day. Through rooms, through conversations, through a town that keeps its secrets and sometimes, at last, lets them go. The fan will hum. The porch lights will hold. The river will keep its steel face quiet. And you, carrying Graybridge gently like a folded map, will wait for tomorrow's questions with a voice that knows how to be soft and still be sure. Morning again. The kind of gray that doesn't belong to weather but to mood. You wake with the sense that something's shifting, not a storm, but pressure. The air itself thinking. You dress slowly, tracing the chill of the floorboards through your socks, letting the house creak its good morning in small, skeletal sounds. Outside, mist curls around the rooftops like memory unwilling to let go. Graybridge hums, tentative, reassembling its rhythm after a night spent talking in whispers. You step outside and join that hum. The courthouse lawn is still dotted with wax puddles from last night's vigil. Candles toppled and fused, melted names etched into stone. Someone's left flowers in mason jars, wild daisies, dandelions, and a few stems of lavender gone brittle. You kneel, touch one of the jars, and feel the cool glass bite your palm. There's a note under it blurred from dew. You are found. Just 3 words, but they hold a century's worth of waiting. You breathe out slowly, like an answer. Inside the courthouse, the fluorescent lights are merciless. The hearing is preliminary routine, procedural, words that sound clean and dull. The accused sits between his attorneys, his hair thinner, his posture careful. You don't recognize the man you passed on sidewalks years ago, only the idea of him. He looks ordinary, which is somehow worse. The judge reads from papers, with the rhythm of someone reciting a spell they don't believe in. The clerk's typing forms a heartbeat. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. You scan the benches, faces washed pale by overhead lights. The detective in the fleece vest, the librarian, the diner owner in her crisp apron, Lena's mother in her familiar cardigan. Hands folded like prayer meeting minutes. She hasn't looked at the defendant once. She's looking instead at a small, framed photo on her lap, the one that hung in the diner's corner for years, edges softened by time. The photo sits there like a punctuation mark at the end of grief. But you know, punctuation doesn't always mean the sentence is over. You remember a fact from history class. that drifts back now, oddly fitting. In 1901, fingerprint analysis was first accepted as legal evidence in the United States. A century later, we've built entire architectures of truth from fragments of skin and hair and light. You think about that lineage, the forensic scientists, the lab techs, and the interns cataloging dust with the reverence of monks. It's science, yes, but also devotion. Every swab, every microscope slide, a small prayer for order in a world that keeps breaking itself. And yet, there's something else, an offbeat detail that sticks. Like a burr on wool. The defense lawyer mentions that the blue bulbs from the heart porch weren't just decorative. They were sold as insect-repellent lamps. A short-lived product line discontinued after 2005 for emitting too much ultraviolet interference. You picture that peculiar hue again. A light that might have distorted colors, making everything a shade away from real. Maybe that's what memory does too. Casts its own wavelength across events, until truth glows strange, unfamiliar. When the session adjourns, you drift outside with the rest, blinking into the real daylight. Reporters cluster by the steps, microphones like steel flowers chasing sound. Someone says, "Closure," and the word feels wrong in your ears. Too small, too final. You want to hand it back and ask for a bigger one. Maybe continuation. Maybe coexistence. You walk past them before anyone asks your opinion. It's enough to have a heartbeat in this weather. Maybe continuation by firmness present. Maybe continuation by present with now two people. And this weather. At the cafe, you order black coffee and a cinnamon roll, partly for sustenance, partly ritual. Steam curls up in a ribbon, faintly sweet, faintly bitter. The radio hums with news from elsewhere, headlines that sound like echoes of this one. You check your phone and see the story trending. Graybridge cold case solved, arrest shocks community. The phrase lands like déjà vu. It's already been printed in your mind since yesterday. You close the phone, preferring the simpler noise of cup meeting saucer, spoon meeting ceramic. Later, at the library, you notice something new on the bulletin board. A child's drawing crayon, bold, uneven lines. A girl under a yellow sun. Trees bending in kind wind. The caption reads, "Miss Lena loves the forest." You smile, because somehow it feels right that a child would draw her not as missing, but as part of the landscape she wanted to protect. The librarian tells you the drawing came in anonymously, folded into the book drop overnight. You imagine small fingers smoothing it flat before slipping it through the slot, like an offering. The afternoon wears thin. The sky leans into silver. You walk to the river one last time. It's calmer now, slow and sure, an old animal breathing. The willow branches touch the surface in lazy prayer. You crouch by the edge, running your hand through the water. It's cold enough to sting, grounding you in the now. The current carries tiny flecks of leaf and light, reminders that nothing really stops moving. You stand there long enough to feel time blur, long enough to hear your own pulse sync with the flow. Behind you, footsteps. You turn to see the detective again, jacket off, sleeves rolled. He looks tired, but lighter somehow. "She can rest now," he says quietly, not looking at you, but at the water. "We all can." You nod. It's not true, not completely, but it's kind. And kindness, you decide, is the closest thing to closure you'll accept tonight. You walk home by way of the mural, now washed clean from the rain. Someone's repainted the missing corner, the children's faces fresh again, boats bright and floating. You trace the outlines with your eyes, thinking how the act of repainting isn't erasure, but remembrance in color. History isn't a single image, it's layers, paint over paint, story over silence. As night falls, the porch lights across Graybridge glow in small constellations. Amber, not blue. You listen for the fan's hum, for the town exhaling. Upstairs, you lie on your bed and imagine the world shrinking to the sound of blades slicing air. The town outside is still awake, Someone's dog barking, a car door shutting softly, a voice on a porch saying, "It's over now." But you know it's never over. It's only quieter. A final thought drifts in something from a philosophy class you once half listened to. Truth is not a destination, but a recurring weather pattern. You believe that now. The storm may pass, but the wind remembers. And so will you. The rain starts again, gentle and indecisive. You watch droplets streak the window, each one carrying a tiny distorted version of your reflection. You breathe out, slow and even. Maybe someday we'll know the truth, but for now, sleep well.